You going first, yeah?
Okay, hello everybody. It's obviously Terry and Dino here. As you're probably aware, we uploaded two videos after our chats with the Carters in Glasgow on Friday.
I do.
And they had quite a few, interesting comments, just probably just one negative one by a particular individual. Um, but on the whole, pretty positive and people enjoying what we did. And then we were going to have this chat anyway. And then Dino contacted me today and says one of the videos is gone. Actually, it's the one which is probably the worst one, actually, in the case of trying to listen, because Dino's getting nowhere with somebody that he's known for an awful long time, back to the early 80s. Somebody I knew when I was in that hall in the early 80s as well. Somebody I haven't seen since 1984, I believe. It's been like, I don't know, 42 years since I've seen this person. And the only people's names that were divulged was obviously Dino's, Dino's dad, Ian's brother-in-law, and the lass he was speaking to. That was it. But we were getting told during the video, oh, you're breaking your data breach and all this. And I tried to explain. I was like, I'm somebody who knows quite a lot about data protection and data breach. Because we don't know anybody's surname, we don't know the date of birth, we don't know their address, we don't know their email address, we don't know their phone number, we don't know their national insurance number or their driving license. There's very little data that we're giving out. In fact, there's probably cameras recording all of us anyway, and we're out in the public space. But yet, one of my videos have been removed and I find it really difficult to try and get this back up. I'll try my best. It's no big loss if it doesn't come back, because it probably was the worst out of the two conversations that we attempted to have. Literally, that one got shut down really early doors. The other one, with the individual we don't know, down at Queen Street Station, that was a more interesting one, because at least this guy was willing to converse with us when everybody else was really shutting down. Um, and the fact that they were able to close it down shows that clearly, I think people in Glasgow must be looking at the channel, not friends of the channel, and are watching to see if they appear in it. If they do appear in it, then they'll go and try and close it down. So I think that's what's happened, because at the end I did put this guy's face on it, and maybe what wasn't a good move, but he didn't. He was a man of little words after that, to be fair. So we never got anywhere with the first group. The next couple, I thought that we spoke to, I think, and everybody's commented on this, that they don't, are not even. One guy said he watched the new video, and he hasn't had time to think about it. And the other lassie hadn't at all, which is very similar to the two people I spoke to Kitford. One had seen it and one hadn't. And the video info, the information from the update by Gerrit Loge totally nullifies the blood card that they had while we were talking to them. It completely nullifies that. And yet they're not aware of this. And somebody even messaged me on the video that's still up today, saying that they'd lost somebody that they'd loved due to the blood transfusion, due to the not able to have a blood transfusion. And you wonder how many people have died in Jehovah's Witnesses prior to last week who weren't able to store their blood, knowing that they had a big operation coming up in 5 or 6 weeks or whatever it is. Um, and I tell you what, Dino, I came away when I was going up the bus, playing the videos on the phone to make sure that it sounded all right. I was depressed. I was sorry for them, to be honest with you, because I tell you the difference I thought between us and them, to quote a Pink Floyd song, is that and you said this several times, the First Peter 3:15, I think it was,
Yeah.
referring that you have to defend your faith, and it's talk about defending the faith. If you want to quote that at this point, because you did say it several
Yeah.
times, right?
Yes. I've got to First Peter 3:15 from the New World Translation.
Yeah,
It says, but sanctify the Christ as Lord in your hearts, always ready to make a defense before everyone who demands of you a reason for the hope you have, doing so with a mild temper and deep respect.
That's
So
right.
basically, that scripture says they're obligated to make a defense
Yes.
of everyone who demands it of them, and they just ignored that.
No. And it's a command, isn't it?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
no. It's a command. They're obligated to do that. And you said
yeah,
that several times, didn't you?
yeah. And the brother at Queen Street, and it was a nice enough conversation, up to a point. There was no bad temper or anything like that. It was all nicely reasonable. But at one point, he said, "We're not here for long conversations or debates, you know." And he basically said, "We're only here essentially to stand by the carts, to offer, the kind of leaflets that they have and point people to the jw.org website. And that's it." And I said to him, "Really?" I said, you're not here to have conversations with people. So it's not really preaching work then, is it? It's not really a ministry. They're basically just glorified. I keep forgetting it.
Yeah,
Like
gone.
McDonald's beef burgers or something that way, or sports shop
Yeah.
for your trainers. That direction, you know. That's all. That's all they're doing. So they're not there to really have conversation, to engage people in conversation. But why, when to, as we said to them, we're not disfellowshipped, we're baptized witnesses to all intents and purposes. Um, we're here asking a serious, reasonable question of you. Why wouldn't you then take the opportunity to have a discussion, on a level that you wouldn't do with just a normal passerby? Why not take the opportunity? What, do you only discuss the Bible when you're on knocking someone's door? So what is this carton business? They're just basically there, as a signpost. They're not being ministers when they're on the carts.
And the interesting
So
thing is,
you're right.
yeah, in relation to the proximity to his cart, he was 20 foot away from it. And the
Mm,
two people I spoke to at Kitford, it was round the corner, and somebody took a leaflet and walked away. So, in other words, they're just cart watchers. Literally, what they could do is get that cart, put a bicycle chain round a stand, drop it off at 10, and come back at 4 and just take it away. And if literature's gone, so be it.
yeah,
That's all they need to do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. Um, yeah. The other thing he said was, he says, "I'm not refusing to talk to you. I'm just choosing not to have this conversation." So what's the difference between refusing to talk to you and choosing not to have this conversation? Although he did say at this point in time, but what other time are we going to have? In fairness, he was trying to say he wasn't as clued up on the change because it had been fairly soon, not long ago. But really, such a major change in your doctrine, us in our day, we were the very night a change like that dropped, we would be in
Yeah,
a group in a coffee house somewhere,
yeah.
sitting, chatting it out between our kind of group. Um, and you would have to have that right in your mind to be able to explain it, before you went on the doors, because as soon as someone asked you that, you would have to really be on the ball and know what you're saying about it. So the point we were making to him was, why are you on the street and you've only watched this once? And he was basically saying, I can't remember what the reasoning. I can't remember what the reasoning was. So have you not actually accepted this change if you don't really, if you haven't, it hasn't sunk in what the reasoning behind it is, but you're here and you've just accepted it. It's I find it crazy. And the other
Another,
thing I was going to say about, sorry, I
yeah,
was just going to
another thing
say
I was going to, yeah, carry on.
the first group at Buchanan bus station, the second group of ladies that we spoke to, one of them recognized me from a previous conversation, and I said to her, where did you see me before? Where did we speak? And I've asked this a number of times when people say that to me, and they never tell me where I met them, when they spoke to me, what we spoke about. And she said, "Well, I've spoken to you before, so I don't need to speak to you again. I'm not speaking to you today." And I'm thinking, I came away and I was thinking about it. See when you go around the door and you knock the door. Do you only ever knock that door once in that street and never work it
Yeah,
again? Or if somebody
yeah,
comes to the door and they
yeah.
say they say to the witness, "Oh, you spoke to me the last time you were around,"
That's
they
right.
wouldn't go, "Oh, you're right, I'm off." No, they would try again. You know, I've spoken to you before, and therefore I don't need to speak to you again. And when we walked up to them, the two of them were standing there, and they're just gassing away to each other. They're just enjoying a conflab between themselves. They weren't even if you like that way with the magazines and looking out and trying to catch people's
Yeah,
attention and
yeah,
smiling. No, they were just focused on themselves, just gassing away. They were just having a gossip, a conflab. All they need to do is just stand by that cat for a couple of hours, and they think they've done a preaching work. And the also thing was where they were both the groups were standing was at the side entrance to Buchanan
yeah,
Bus Street.
yeah.
Now it's
The wrong
facing the
entrance.
traffic.
Yeah,
It's the wrong entrance because you're not going to get that many people. They should be round the front where they normally are. So that they've
yeah,
picked a spot where there's the least amount of passers-by that there's going to be because they're really not looking to speak to people. It's the easiest thing in the world to just stand there for a few hours. Um, you know, it's why they think they're doing the work. They keep going on about who's the only people in the world doing the preaching of the good news.
yeah.
Well, if that's the preaching of the good news, my God, my goodness, I stand at the side entrance of the bus station, um, basically speaking to no one. So it's a nonsense, as far
I
as I'm
don't know.
concerned.
I was thinking of we've played this card a few times that we've said to them, um, remember this is we've had this before. Where's this going, lads? Well, what's the point of you talking to us? And we put it quite plainly. Go, look, we've got questions that need answering here, and we're hoping that you can answer them. And I've just thought about this. I can't remember the last time a Carter ever pulled out the scriptures. I don't think they have the Bible anymore. In fact, I was watching a video from a guy called Wally, who's got a big channel, and he went to the his memorial. Don't know why. And when the guy from the Bethel was actually reading it, he says,
I know the one, yeah.
yeah, he says the fact that you never heard any pages turning was staggering. They don't use the Bible, and when we speak to them, I've never had anybody come out with anything to then trying to reason with me from the scriptures. It's never happened. Now, what I'm going to say is next time is that parable about the lost sheep. It's in, I think,
Hmm.
Matthew and Luke. It's twice. So it's the good shepherd who's got 99 sheep. One of them disappears. So he leaves the 99 sheep to try and find the lost sheep to bring him
Yeah.
back into the flock. And he actually says, I think it goes that there'll be more joy in heaven for the one lost sheep that returns to the flock. And we go up to them, to these elders who are the shepherds, to just say, look, we're a lost sheep here. Can you help us here? Bring us back into the flock. And they don't even want to do that. And yet I know
Yeah,
for a certainty when we used to chat people's doors, and sometimes we'd go to a door of somebody who's an ex-witness, not disfellowship, because you couldn't speak to them back in those days. Now you go, hello. But back then you couldn't speak. But you go to a door of somebody and says, you know they've fallen away. Or somebody you might not, and they just all go, oh, I used to be a witness. And you would do your utmost to try and reason from the scriptures to bring them back in. You wouldn't go, oh well. You wouldn't just
yeah,
say, oh, dust off my feet. You'd actually say, why did you leave? How can we bring you back? What can we assure you of that this is the truth? And at that point, we could have said to them, well, we were, can you explain this, why this change has happened to the blood? They won't even defend their own faith. I actually now believe that the current generation of Jehovah's Witnesses are the most uneducated on not only the Bible, but on what they're supposed to believe and where it appears in the Bible. At least we had a fair inkling of where we'd find the basis for our belief, so we could say that to whoever we met on the doors. Whoever that was, well, we believe this because of this. I don't think these people can do it. I think they're now just geared to say, as you're well aware, go away and just look up jw.org. And you actually said to the guy, well, that they don't answer the
yeah,
questions. I'm here with you to get the answers.
yeah. No, they're pointing to jw.org, and it seems to be that the governing body are the only ones that are allowed to kind of say the governing body. You rarely saw them. You rarely kind of really knew who they were. You rarely saw them or heard them. They were in the background doing their work. Whereas now, the recent governing body, they seem to think that they're TV stars, they're superstars, and they're like the only ones that do the teaching, you know. So they kept saying to us, "Have you watched the video?" Yes, I've watched the video. Well, I can't say any more than that. Yeah, but we weren't actually wanting them to tell us what the video says because we've watched it. We were asking them, "What do you make of that? Do you agree with that reasoning?"
Yes. Yeah.
Because basically, with this blood issue, I mean, they've been teaching this since the 1950s that effectively a blood transfusion is eating blood, right? That's because they have to admit that Acts 15, when it's talking about abstaining from blood, it's not specifically mentioning medical care transfusions because it wasn't known then, of course. But what they've said for all this time is that transfusions is the same as eating blood, right? So now they're saying autologous blood transfusion of your own blood is allowed, but blood from someone else is still not allowed. So how can eating your own blood be different from eating someone else's blood? You know, for instance, if you were to take a cannula into your arm and you were to draw out some blood yourself and make up some black pudding, right? Use your own blood to make a black pudding sausage. Could you eat that, even though it's your own
Mm,
blood? Could you eat it?
mm,
I don't think so. But
well,
they're saying that transfusing your own blood is okay. But surely that's still eating, because if transfusing blood is eating, then how can you transfuse your own blood? And how could the transfusion of someone else's blood be outlawed still? Because that's just this, you're still eating blood,
yeah.
you know? So for this change, they've had to split that understanding, and no one seems to be questioning it, you know? Um, Plus, there was a couple of things I looked at it because we never, when we did the last video on blood, we didn't really have a lot of time to really look into it. But I watched Losh's video, and basically he's saying that he's applied Leviticus chapter 17 and verse 14, where it talks about pouring out the blood onto the ground. So it's basically that scripture saying if blood is coming out, if it's not going onto the altar, then it has to be poured on the ground and covered over. In other words, it's got to be disposed of if it's not going on the altar. Okay. But he's saying in his video, well, obviously, because I think they look at that verse in particular because blood coming out, autologous blood transfusion then requires it to be stored. It comes out of the body and then stored. Whereas that verse, they've always said, well, once it comes out, you can't store it. You've got to dispose of it. So they're now trying to say you can store it. So his reasoning is that scripture is under the Mosaic law, but we're not under the Mosaic law, right? But he's saying that as if that's a clarification. But if you look at all the kind of publications that dealt on blood, going back to the 50s and 60s, which I had a look at this week, they've always said that we're not under the Mosaic law, right? So there's no change there. They haven't clarified that. But the other big thing that is the point he makes is that Acts 15, he says, does not comment on using your own blood for medical care. So on that basis, we can allow it because Acts 15 doesn't mention using your own blood for me. But at the same token, the same logic and reasoning, it doesn't mention using any blood for transfusion, for medical care. It doesn't refer to that at all. So if it's not referring to autologous blood transfusion, it's not talking about allogenic blood transfusion either. So why is one allowed and not the other? That's not logical. And I'll make this point. I was thinking about it. They're usually pretty exact with their language, and if they're going to make such a big change, I would think they would have to be really careful about how they put it, unless they're really stupid, right? Because if they're going to use that reasoning, then as I've said, it makes illogical the fact that any other transfusion is not allowed. So I'm thinking, are they possibly leading up to making all transfusions a conscience matter? But they're just doing it step by step rather than do it all in a one-up, which would be really, really big. I think that might be the case because of the reasoning that they've used. Because if they're not going to do that, then to use that reasoning, they've left themselves open to being inconsistent. You know, it doesn't make sense to allow one and not the other on the basis that Acts 15 doesn't talk about blood for medical care, you know. So birthdays might be coming up, but possibly, allogenic blood transfusions might be a conscience matter in due course. We'll see. I'd put a bet on it if the bookies would take a price on it.
Well, it's funny. So, in other words, I spoke to the lassie in Kitford, and she says the change is due to new medical science, which is complete bollocks, right? So she doesn't understand it. Well, we never got any joy from the Buchanan bus carters. Queen Street guy watched the video and never even thought about it, and an Asian lassie next to him never even watched it either. It's just unbelievable. So anyway, obviously we'll give them a month, and if we meet up in Glasgow again, there should be no excuses for them not being able to explain this. I tell you what made me really depressed about this as well, because the lassie there that we both know, and I said I haven't seen her for like 40 since 1984, 42 years. She, as far as I'm aware, she's never got married.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so she's devoted. I think she's probably still pioneering, and she was pioneering back in 1984. So just think about it now. All of her life devoted to this organization, and she never got married. I don't know if she ever had a boyfriend or boyfriends, maybe a couple. Never got married, never had children, and now no chance of having children because she's a wee bit older than us. And I just thought, how sad that you've dedicated your life to this organization. And when you actually said to her about uh, the changes, keep explaining changes, she actually says, "Oh, I love this sort of thing, Dino. I love this
Mm,
sort of thing."
mm,
And I was staggered thinking to myself, my God, you love the fact that something that you've been taught to believe and respect and teach other people, that every few decades that you've been told, oh, by the way, see what you used to believe, that's gone. Did she love the fact that when they changed the generation thought and all of a sudden it wasn't the generation thought 94, did she love that as well? And when you think of all that, did she love the fact that she may have been able to go to further education and then she couldn't, or should have cracked on with the family and children? All these things. How can you love inconsistency? How can you love being time and time again being let down by this organization, changing the goalposts? It's just
yeah.
like I don't know. I just feel so sad because it's like these people's power of reason just doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, say I think those of us who have left the organization left because we do have a power. We've used our powers of reason, and that's one of the scriptures. I can't think what it is now. Is it Romans 12? Maybe. I always like the way the New World Translation translated that verse because it did kind of specify that you use your powers of reason, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, you've got to really think about, don't just accept things blindly. So those of us who followed that have left because their teachings are no longer consistent, they're no longer reasonable. And all the ones who have stayed, I think, are the ones that are who, they're not using their power of reason. As I said, she's from one of the longest established families in probably Scotland in the witnesses.
Yes.
And she'll have been preaching and arguing for the blood doctrine for decades and saying, that all blood transfusions is eating of blood, right? And going along with that understanding. But as soon as this governing body make a change, it's accepted like that, after all these years. So have you only used that argument because that's what they told you to use, or did you really believe it? If you really believed it, I would have thought you would have to go, what? We're changing it? What? Is it not eating? Is it still not eating your blood? So if you transfuse your own blood, it's not eating it. But if you transfuse someone, it is eating it. There's no question. They just accept it blindly. Um, the organization as it is now is just a propaganda machine, and the ones that are there are just they're just swallowing it down. I mean, I said to her 3 times, "Have you watched the video?" And she was avoiding answering it, and eventually she says, "I've already said so." Right? And I looked at the video a couple of times, and I don't remember. I don't hear her saying that she watched the video. And I asked her 3 times because I thought, I don't know that you have. I don't know that you've actually really looked at this and really thought about it. You've just accepted it, you know.
Yeah.
And and basically the whole conversation, right from the very start, it was deflection, deflection. Didn't want to speak to us. She clocked us. As soon as I saw her, I knew who it was, and I knew that she clocked us. And I got a wee bit annoyed with her at the start because she was clearly trying to avoid the conversation. Excuse me. And trying to deflect, didn't want, and even at the very start, she says to us, "We'll see you another time." And
Oh,
in other words,
that
go
was bad,
away.
wasn't it?
See you
Oh,
another.
bad,
I
wasn't it?
hadn't actually spoken to her in about 15 years, right? And it might be another 15 years before I speak to her again, but I'll see you another time. And I thought, yeah, here we go again with the kind of condescension and the patronizing. And they always say to me, "Oh, how's your father?" Because they know my father's in a care home. And I started to say, well, nobody in the hall really goes to see him. There's one brother. And she came back straight away. Dennis goes to see him. And I said, yeah, he's the only one out of the whole congregation that goes to see him, because the elders have said to him, you go see him. In other words, we're not going to bother with him, but as long as you go as the token person. And I said, he's never had an elder's visit. They don't shepherd him. I was at the home the other day there. I asked them, did they come round on Thursday night with the emblems? No. So he's been in there
Joking.
4 years. No. So he's been there 4 years. They've never brought the emblems to him. They're not interested in him. And as soon as I mentioned that, she tried to get me off the subject, and then she was saying, oh, how are you? How are you, Dino? It was constant deflection the whole time, just trying to avoid. And as you said, surely after 15 years, and I've never spoken to her in that time, you would think that she would want to say, well, look, why are you not back at the meetings? Why don't you come back?
Yeah.
So she's trying to show concern, but it's insincere. It's insincere, because they're not concerned. They take the view, as soon as you leave, you're lost to us. There's no prodigal son. They've never read that parable, So they just want to avoid. They don't want to speak about it, because I don't think they feel confident to justify the doctrines, and justify that change. And so that's really disappointing. And at one point, I must have been gesturing like that, and because I was trying to explain to her Leviticus 17. So she interrupted me again. She says something like, hand gestures, Dino. And I says, well, I'm not pointing at you. I said, I'm just using my hands. I said, I'm Italian, we speak with our hands. And I says, theocratic ministry school, gesturing as you're talking. She says, not to overuse it though, sort of thing, But all she was doing was, she was just trying to interrupt my exposition of Leviticus 17, because she didn't want to hear it, I said to her, well, I've tried, but you just don't want to listen. And you don't want to try and prove me wrong. It's shameful, really.
Yes. Right. Anyway, we've come to the end. I think we've discussed what I wanted to discuss, and I'll still try and see if I can get that YouTube video back up. If it doesn't come back, it's no big loss. There'll be others, probably better than that one.
Just one
But
last quick one. We got a couple of minutes, or
yeah,
have you for
no,
time?
you've got 5 minutes.
Right. Now, I was just going to say, there was one or two comments in the videos about we were kind of verging on mockery with them, maybe slightly, but really, we weren't there to mock them. We were there to have conversations. We were there to have right good in-depth. But it's at the end of the day, you get so, what's the word? But you can't believe the attitudes of them, and the way that they'll either just totally clam up or run away. That I said in a comment today, it's like they're making a mockery of their ministry, really. And all we were trying to do was show them up for what they are, really. We're showing them up as ones that are not really able to defend, or unwilling to defend their faith, not to kind of make mock of them personally, but to make a mockery of what it is they think they're actually doing and think they're achieving with their work. Because when they're standing there with those magazines, they're basically saying to every passerby silently, but effectively what they're saying is, you're all going to die unless you get this religion, So they're sending that message out. What we're doing by approaching them is basically saying to them, well, I'm not going to walk by you. If you're putting that out, then I'm going to tackle you and your ideology, and I'm going to put it to the test. And the point is that think it's John Milton's book on liberty, and he makes the point that any belief system has got to allow itself to be criticised. And you're actually doing a service by criticising ideologies. Because if you criticise it and prove it wrong, then you can find what the truth is, and you're helping both parties. If you criticise an ideology and it turns out it's right, well, then you've proven it's right, both to them and yourself, and you may be correct, so everybody benefits. Right, so
Exactly.
it's not a bad thing to criticize an ideology, but the witnesses will not suffer any criticism. And it's that lack of self-criticism or allowing any criticism of their beliefs that, to me, it proves to me that they are a cult.
So, right, thank you for your chat, Dino, and for your points.
So my rant.
They annoy me too. Anyway, right, we'll put this one. At least this one shouldn't get taken down by YouTube. So yeah, just really got time to say goodbye. So thank you everybody for watching this, and stay tuned. And hopefully we'll be able to have some more karting experiences in the month of May. And hopefully we'll get some new people to talk to. At the end of the day, is we want them to talk. We don't want to do all the talking. We want to ask them questions and get them to talk. And that's the problem, that they don't want to talk. Anyway, Gina, do you want to say
If they
goodbye?
talk, if they prove us wrong, yeah, okay. See you next time. Bye for now.
Okay, see you later, everybody. Bye bye. Bye bye.